He said no to me and I never forgot it. I wasn't used to being ignored. Not in school, not in clubs, not in life. So when Zaid Khan, the quiet, overly serious Muslim guy from uni, dismissed me like I was nothing, it hit a nerve. I should have moved on. Should have brushed it off like every other minor rejection. But I didn't. I studied him. Watched his speeches online. Followed his faith. Took notes. Copied his values. Not because I admired him, but because I wanted to crush him. My plan was simple. Become everything he stood for, then rip it all apart. But what I didn't expect was to find something real in the middle of the act. I still remember the way he looked at me. Calm, distant, annoyingly unaffected. Zaid Khan had this weird stillness about him. He didn't fidget. He didn't flirt. He didn't even look at me like other men did, like I was some reward they deserved for breathing near me. I was 21. Confident. Pretty. My Instagram was full of flattering photos and shallow compliments. I'd never been told no. Not by guys, not by teachers, not by anyone who mattered. Until him. Zaid and I were in the same political theory class at uni. He always sat in the front, taking notes like a machine, and left as soon as lectures ended. Never partied. Never drank. Never made a fool of himself like the rest of us. Naturally, that made him interesting. I approached him once. Casual, smiling, charming. I asked if he wanted to grab coffee sometime, maybe go over lecture notes. He looked at me, paused, then said one word. No. No explanation. No softening. Just that. Like I'd asked him to walk on broken glass. I laughed awkwardly and walked off like it was no big deal. But my chest felt like it had cracked. That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I liked him. Not really. It was the audacity of it. The way he looked at me like I didn't exist. Like I wasn't enough. No one had ever made me feel small like that. And so began the obsession. First I just checked his socials. He had a small following, nothing flashy. Quotes from the Quran, some lecture clips, photos of charity work in Syria. Boring if I'm honest. But then I started watching one of his public debates. Then another. He spoke about justice, faith, modesty, discipline. He spoke with a kind of quiet fire that made you feel like maybe the world wasn't completely doomed. Still didn't mean he had the right to dismiss me like that. Years passed. I graduated. Moved to London. Got a job in marketing and tried to live the influencer-light lifestyle. Yoga on weekends. Bottomless brunches. Hinge dates with men who smelled like gym socks and thought feminism was a TikTok trend. And yet, I kept thinking about him. One night, after a particularly miserable date with a banker who bragged about crypto for 2 hours, I went home, poured a glass of wine, and found myself typing "What do Muslims believe?" into Google. It started as a joke. I told myself it was just research. Just curiosity. But deep down I knew what I was doing. I wanted to understand Zaid's world. I wanted to beat him at it. If I could learn his faith, mirror his principles, become the kind of person he couldn't ignore. Maybe then I could finally win. Maybe then he'd see me, want me, need me. And once he did, I'd be the one to say no. That was the plan. I bought a Quran. I downloaded lectures. I followed Muslim influencers and hijabi fashionistas. I even started waking up early to read hadith summaries with my morning coffee. At first it all felt strange, foreign words, strange rituals, rules that seemed oppressive. But then I found myself underlining verses, replaying certain talks, feeling a weird tug in my chest when I read about things like sabr, patience, and tawakkul, trusting in God. I wasn't ready to admit it yet, but something was shifting. One night I had a dream. I was walking barefoot on a road that kept changing. Stone, sand, water. It hurt, but I didn't stop. Up ahead was a door, old, wooden, glowing faintly. And standing in front of it was Zaid. He didn't speak. Just looked at me and nodded once, then turned and walked through. I woke up gasping. My heart pounding. I didn't believe in signs. I didn't even believe in God. But something was happening. And for the first time since that humiliating No. I wasn't sure if I was the one in control anymore. I'm not sure when the plan stopped being just a plan. At first, it was all performance. I downloaded the Quran Majid app. Set reminders for prayer times even though I didn't pray. I watched hijabi makeup tutorials and practiced Arabic phrases in the mirror. Not because I believed any of it, but because I wanted to look like I did. To him at least. Zaid still posted occasionally, mostly about community work and dua events. I noticed he'd been invited to a conference in London. A small one. Nothing glitzy. But I knew what that meant. He was coming here. Suddenly everything kicked into high gear. I bought modest clothing. Long coats. Neutral colors. Even a few scarves. When I walked into the Islamic bookstore near Edgware Road, my palms were sweating. The girl behind the counter wore a warm smile and said Assalamu alaikum, like I was one of them. I smiled back and mumbled, hi. It felt like trespassing. But I bought a Tasbih, a book on women in Islam and a beginner's guide to prayer anyway. Each night I practiced. Not just the rituals, the role. I imagined meeting Zaid. Bumping into him by accident. He'd be shocked. Intrigued. Maybe even impressed. And when he asked why Islam? I'd say something poetic. Something powerful. I'd say it was because of him. And just when he softened, I'd walk away. That was the fantasy. I didn't expect the guilt. The more I learned, the more I realized how sacred everything was to the people who believed. The prayers, the fasting, the discipline. It wasn't cosplay for them. It was real. And I was faking it. Or was I? I couldn't tell anymore. There were moments, brief, quiet ones, when I did feel something. Like when I tried fasting during Ramadan just to see if I could. I thought I'd hate it. But instead I felt strangely calm. Hungry, sure. But focused. Lighter. Like my mind stopped buzzing for once. I didn't tell anyone. My friends would have mocked me. They were all about manifesting energy and spiritual independence. But the second I mentioned religion, they rolled their eyes. Especially Islam. It was too extreme. Too patriarchal. Too backwards. I didn't care. That scared me. I went to a mosque. Just to watch. Just to observe. It was this quiet little place in East London. I sat in the women's area behind a partition and listened to a lecture about forgiveness. The Imam talked about how even the Prophet Muhammad forgave people who had hurt him, people who'd tried to kill him, humiliate him, destroy his family. He said, when you forgive someone, it's not about them. It's about freeing yourself. That line stayed with me. Because I wasn't free. I was still chained to Zaid. To what he made me feel. To my need to prove something. And no matter how much I faked it, the modesty, the knowledge, the ritual, I still hadn't let go. The day of the conference came. I wore a pale green abaya I had no business wearing. Wrapped a scarf loosely around my hair. Stood in the back of the auditorium waiting. Zaid was up front. Calm as ever. He spoke about finding peace through submission. About how worship wasn't just bowing your head. It was surrendering your ego. My stomach twisted. Because all I'd done for years was feed mine. After the event, I lingered in the hallway. And for a brief moment our eyes met. He looked straight at me. Recognition flickered in his face. Subtle, restrained. He gave a small nod. Respectful. Then turned away and began talking to an old man beside him. That was it. No spark. No shock. No slow-motion moment where he realized who I was and fell to his knees in regret. Just a nod. I went home that night and cried. Not because I failed, but because I didn't even know what winning meant anymore. Was this still revenge? Or was I chasing something else entirely? That night I opened the Quran again. This time not to look for quotes. Not to impress anyone. Just to read. And for the first time, I whispered something I never thought I'd say. God, if you're real, I'm listening. I didn't wake up Muslim. There was no dramatic moment. No white light. No divine voice whispering ancient truths into my ear. But something shifted. It started with silence. Not the awkward kind, the kind that feels like an exhale after holding your breath for too long. I stopped checking Zaid's Instagram. I stopped practicing lines in the mirror. I stopped pretending. And in that space, something else began to grow. I started praying. Not perfectly. Not even regularly. But sincerely. The first time I bowed my head, I cried. Not because I felt holy or pure or enlightened, but because it felt real. Like I wasn't performing anymore. Like for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was just there. Me and God. And for once that was enough. I began reading the Quran from the beginning. Fully. Without skimming. Without searching for something I could weaponize. The stories hit me differently now. Moses. Mary. The way they were tested. Humiliated. Isolated. But never abandoned. There was this verse I underlined 3 times. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. Quran 94:6. I didn't know how to explain it, but I believed that. Not blindly. Not like a child. But like someone who had tasted restlessness for years. And finally caught a glimpse of peace. One night, I sat at my desk staring at a photo of myself from 3 years ago. Fake lashes, forced smile, a cocktail in one hand and emptiness in the other. And I thought, who was that even for? Every choice I'd made up to that point, the clothes, the relationships, the curated life, it had all been designed to fill something. Something hollow. But it never worked. I always needed more. More attention, more likes, more validation. And when Zaid denied me that, I snapped. Because deep down I'd handed him too much power. That realization hurt. More than the rejection. More than the years I spent chasing after him in my head. Because it meant the wound wasn't his fault. It was mine. I wanted him to complete me. To make me feel worthy. And when he didn't, I blamed him, and then I tried to become him. But I didn't need to be Zaid. I didn't need to impress him. I didn't even need him to notice me. What I needed was to forgive myself. So I did something wild. I put on hijab. Not to post it. Not to show anyone. I looked in the mirror expecting to feel trapped. But instead, I felt covered. Protected. Like I was finally choosing who got to see me. Like I was drawing a boundary around my worth. It wasn't permanent. Not yet. But it was honest. And for once that felt like enough. I started attending sisters' circles at the mosque. Quiet at first. Just listening. They talked about things I never expected. Trauma, love, patience, self-respect. They weren't robots or oppressed housewives like the media always showed. They were funny, brilliant, strong. They made space for me without judgment, without expectation. One of them, Amina, once said to me, "You don't have to know everything to believe something." That sentence stuck with me. Because I didn't have all the answers. I still had doubts, fears, habits. But I also had this tug, this persistent, gentle pull, toward something better. One night I whispered the Shahada to myself. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah. I wasn't even sure I'd said it correctly. But I meant it. And after I said it, I just sat there. In the dark. Smiling through tears. Not because everything made sense now, but because for the first time I did. I wasn't Isla who got rejected. I wasn't Isla who needed revenge. I was just Isla. A woman who found God in the middle of her own mess. And maybe, just maybe, that was always the point. I didn't tell Zaid I had converted. There was no big reveal. No dramatic moment where I stood in front of him in a hijab and whispered, "It was you all along." Because it wasn't. Not anymore. Yes, he sparked something. But the journey after that, that was mine. Months passed. My life slowed down in the best way. I wasn't chasing anymore. Not validation. Not attention. Not him. I moved into a smaller flat. Deleted half my social media. Started waking up early for far, drinking mint tea, journaling instead of doom scrolling. There was peace in the routine. Peace in the prayer. Peace in the stillness I used to run from. I didn't need loud nights or louder people. I needed truth, simplicity, sincerity. And for the first time in my adult life, I had all three. One afternoon, I attended a seminar on women in Islam. Nothing fancy, just a small gathering in a library basement. And there he was, Zaid. He was standing by the tea table, speaking quietly with another brother. He looked exactly the same, focused, calm, thoughtful. I froze. Not because I still wanted him, but because I didn't. I thought seeing him again would spark something, desire, anger, embarrassment. I felt still, complete, like someone who had made it to the end of a long, bitter novel and finally closed the book. Eventually he noticed me. His eyes flickered with recognition. He smiled politely, then walked over. Isla, right? Yes. I thought that was you. I wasn't sure. You look different. I smiled. I feel different. He paused, studied me the way he used to study books, then said softly, "It's good to see you here." He didn't ask why, didn't pry, didn't need to, but as he could tell. Not from the scarf or the salam I returned, but from the way I stood. From the quiet. From the peace. "Alhamdulillah," I said. And he nodded. We talked briefly. Nothing deep. Just small words wrapped in mutual respect. Then he went back to his conversation and I joined a group of sisters near the bookshelves. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. Because that part of my story was over. Now when people ask how I found Islam, I don't tell them about Zaid. I tell them about the night I prayed and meant it. About the day I finally forgave myself. About the peace I found when I stopped pretending. Sometimes Allah uses strange roads to bring us home. Mine started with ego, revenge, and a broken heart. But it ended with truth. With faith. With freedom. And that's all I ever really wanted.
We talked for 10, maybe 15 minutes. Then she said she had to go. She wished me well and left me standing there like an idiot, staring at the wind shaking the leaves above her empty bench. Something cracked inside me that day. And I hated it. I didn't want to respect her. I didn't want to admire her. I wanted to win. But more and more, I couldn't even remember what winning looked like. That night, I sat on my bed with my laptop open. I was halfway through another video by Dr. Omar when I hit pause and just sat there staring at my screen. What was I even doing? This wasn't just about Amina anymore. It wasn't about revenge. Somewhere along the way, I had crossed a line. I was actually interested. Not in proving Islam wrong, but in figuring out what the hell it really was. I had questions I didn't know how to ask. I had emotions I couldn't pin down. I had this weird, growing feeling that maybe I was the one being challenged, me, not her. That realization pissed me off and calmed me down at the same time. I didn't know it then, but that night was the last time I would ever think about Islam as hers. From that point on, it started becoming mine too. The thing about trying to expose someone's beliefs is, sometimes they expose you instead. I didn't plan to change. I didn't even want to change. But something was happening quietly under the surface. I started waking up earlier, not for any real reason, just couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed at 5 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering what was happening to me. Why did I feel off? Why did everything I used to enjoy, video games, parties, flirting, meaningless conversations, feel so empty now? I wasn't suddenly super spiritual. I still cursed too much. Still argued online. Still judged people like it was a hobby. But deep down, something was shifting. And it scared me. One night, I was walking home from a late study session and I passed by the masjid again. The same one a friend had invited me to weeks before. I'd been once, out of curiosity, but didn't stay long. This time, the lights were on, and I could hear soft recitation inside. Something about it felt magnetic. I walked closer, not really knowing why. My heart was racing like I was doing something illegal. I stood at the door for a full minute, then turned around and walked away. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I turned back to what I could control. My laptop, my notes, my questions. I made a new rule: no more YouTube debates. No more polemics. Just read the Quran. Just read it. Like a book. Start to finish. So I did. It was confusing at times, sure. But it wasn't chaotic. It felt personal. Not like a history book or a textbook. More like a conversation. And I didn't always understand what it was saying, but I couldn't ignore how it said it. There were verses that made me stop mid-sentence. Do they not reflect upon themselves? Allah created the heavens and the earth and everything between them in truth and for an appointed term. But most people deny they will meet their Lord. Quran 30:8. It was like the book was talking to me. Not yelling. Not preaching. Just asking. I didn't have answers. And for the first time in a long time, that felt okay. I started praying. Not like Muslims do. No ritual, no Arabic, no direction. Just me, sitting on my bedroom floor at 2 a.m., whispering into the dark. God, if you're there, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say. But I think I'm starting to believe you are. And I don't know what that means. No thunder. No light beams. No mystical experience. But I slept like a rock that night. A week later, I saw Amina again. This time, I didn't plan it. I was just grabbing a smoothie and she was standing in line ahead of me. I almost turned around, but she looked back and smiled like she'd been expecting me. Hey, she said. Long time. Yeah, I laughed. Been doing research. She raised an eyebrow. Academic or personal? Both, I said before I could even think about it. We sat on a bench nearby, sipping smoothies in silence for a moment before she said, You seem different. I feel different. Still planning your argument? I smirked. Not exactly. I think the argument kinda turned on me. She chuckled. That's usually how it goes. I hesitated, then asked, How did you know it was real? Your faith, I mean. Amina thought for a moment, then said, When I stopped needing proof and started feeling peace. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about trusting the one who does. That hit me. Not because it was poetic or wise or whatever. It hit because I wanted that. Not just to understand Islam, but to belong to something bigger than myself. To believe in something that didn't fall apart under pressure. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about Amina anymore. This was about me. The next Friday, I went back to the masjid. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't bring a friend. Just walked in, barefoot, nervous as hell. A kind old man handed me a chair near the back. I listened to the khutbah, not understanding half of it, but hanging on every word like it was oxygen. When the prayer started, I didn't know what to do, so I just watched. Rows of men standing, bowing, prostrating together in perfect rhythm. Like a tide. Like a heartbeat. I'd never seen anything like it. Afterward, someone approached me. First time? Second, I said. But the first that mattered. He smiled. Want to talk? I nodded. We sat. Talked for hours. He answered my questions. Gently. Without pushing. Then he said something I'll never forget. You don't have to understand everything to take the first step. You just need to know where your heart is pointing. That night, I stood alone in my room, shaking, heart pounding, and whispered the words I had read so many times. Ashhadu in la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew who I was now. Becoming Muslim didn't magically fix my life. There was no lightning bolt of enlightenment. No angels singing. No immediate clarity about who I was supposed to be now. Just peace. A kind of peace I didn't even know I'd been searching for. That first night after I said the Shahada, I sat on my bed for hours. No music. No distractions. Just me. And this quietness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. It was like I'd stopped fighting something I didn't even know I was wrestling with. Of course, the questions didn't stop. How do I pray? How do I fast? What do I tell my friends? What do I do about my past? But weirdly, none of that overwhelmed me. For once, I wasn't chasing answers to win anything. I was just learning. Like a beginner. Like someone who wasn't ashamed to say, I don't know. But I want to know. And people were there to help. The brothers at the masjid welcomed me like I'd always been part of the family. They taught me how to pray, how to make wudu, how to open my palms and talk to God with nothing but raw honesty. And man, those first few prayers? I didn't understand all the Arabic. I messed up the movements. I doubted myself every second. But I cried every time. Not because I felt guilty, but because, for once, I felt seen. I didn't see Amina for almost a month. I didn't avoid her. I just didn't seek her out. Not anymore. She wasn't the point. She wasn't the goal. She was the door that led me here, and I was grateful for that. But I had walked through that door and I was standing in a whole new room now. I remember the first time I saw her. It was the second week of my sophomore year at UCLA. I had just transferred from a community college and was still finding my place. The campus was buzzing with activity, people handing out flyers, music playing in the quad, and students lounging around like they owned the world. She was sitting under a tree near the humanities building, a book in her lap and this peaceful energy about her. She wore a light-colored hijab, a simple blouse and jeans. Nothing flashy, but somehow she stood out like the only thing in color in a black and white movie. I didn't know her name. I didn't even know what hijab meant back then. All I knew was, she was beautiful. Not Instagram model beautiful, not that airbrushed kind of thing. She had this dignity about her. Like she didn't care if you noticed her or not. And that made me notice her even more. I kept passing by that spot the next few days, hoping to catch another glimpse. Eventually, I got my chance when we ended up in the same ethics discussion group. Her name was Amina. She had a soft voice, but her words were sharp. She didn't speak much, but when she did, everyone listened. She always seemed calm, like nothing fazed her. When people debated heated topics, she stayed cool, quoting philosophers and scholars like she was born in a library. I was hooked. So, like any mildly cocky 20-year-old American guy, I waited until after class one day and casually caught up to her. "Hey, Amina, right?" I said, trying not to sound like I'd been rehearsing that line in my head for 3 days. She looked at me, smiled politely, and nodded. "Yes. You're Tyler?" I grinned. "Yeah. I was wondering if you maybe wanted to grab a coffee sometime? Just hang out or whatever." There was a pause. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Then she said, very gently, "I appreciate you asking. But I don't date." I blinked. "At all?" She nodded. "I'm Muslim. Dating isn't really part of my values." I laughed a little, thinking maybe she was joking. "Wait, like, ever?" She smiled again. "It's not personal. I just don't engage in relationships outside of marriage." Now look, I'd been turned down before. That's life. But this one hit different. It wasn't that she rejected me. It was like, I never even had a shot. I wasn't just the wrong guy, I was the wrong kind of guy. I didn't show it then, of course. I nodded, said something dumb like, "Respect that," and walked off. But inside I was pissed. Not at her, exactly. But at how untouchable she seemed. Like she was above everything. I didn't get it. Was it arrogance? Was it brainwashing? Was it some kind of superiority complex? And that's when the thought came to me. I'll show her. I'll study her religion, find its flaws, and throw them in her face. Let's see how high and mighty she feels when I'm done. It wasn't just about getting back at her. It was about pulling down the wall she hid behind. I wanted to see her squirm. To admit that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't better than the rest of us. That was the night I opened a new tab on my laptop and typed into Google. Contradictions in the Quran. I didn't know it yet, but that one search would end up changing my life in ways I couldn't begin to imagine. At first, it was all fun and games. I watched hours of YouTube debates, read random Reddit threads, skimmed through blogs written by angry ex-Muslims and overly confident Christian apologists. I picked out verses, took them out of context, and prepared arguments in my head like I was going into battle. But as I kept digging, something strange started happening. The more I read from actual Muslim sources, the ones that weren't filtered through hate or fear, the less cartoonish it all seemed. I expected fire and brimstone, brainwashing, oppression. What I found was structure, logic, even beauty. Still, I kept telling myself I was just doing this to destroy her arguments. I was gathering ammo. That's it. I wasn't impressed. I wasn't moved. I wasn't curious. At least, that's what I told myself. But in reality, the crack had already started. If you had asked me back then why I was still reading about Islam 2 weeks after Amina turned me down, I would have said something like, "I'm just curious." Total lie. I wasn't curious. I was obsessed. Not with the religion, at least not consciously, but with her. And if I couldn't get her attention by being charming, I was gonna get it by being smart. Smarter than her. Smarter than her religion. I'd study Islam like a test I was gonna ace, and then use that A+ to shove her smugness right back in her face. So I dug deeper. I started watching long-form debates. Muslims versus atheists, Muslims versus Christians, Muslims versus former Muslims, with huge YouTube followings. At first, I only paid attention to the parts that confirmed what I already believed, that religion was outdated, irrational, and probably toxic. But the more I listened, the more things started to shift. There was this one guy, Dr. Omar something, I don't remember his full name, but he wasn't flashy or aggressive like the others. Just calm, logical, and honestly, kinda brilliant. He didn't argue like he wanted to win. He explained like he wanted you to understand. I hated how reasonable he sounded. I started reading the Quran, an English translation of course, and at first, I looked at it the same way I looked at Shakespeare in high school. Dense, confusing, kinda boring. But I couldn't stop thinking about certain verses. And we have certainly created man, and we know what his soul whispers to him, and we are closer to him than his jugular vein. Quran 50:16. It hit different. Not in a religious way. More like a gut punch. I kept thinking, how the hell did this book, written over 1,000 years ago, sound like it was talking directly to me? Still, I reminded myself, this wasn't a spiritual journey. It was an operation. A mission. I even started showing up at campus events hosted by the Muslim Students Association. I told myself I was doing field research. Truth was, I just wanted to hear how they talked, what they believed, how they answered questions. I even asked questions myself, skeptical ones. They didn't get defensive. In fact, they welcomed it. Invited me to a Friday prayer. Offered to buy me coffee afterward. No one tried to convert me or argue with me. They just treated me like a human being. And I hated how hard that was to attack. So I pushed harder. I made a list of things I thought were problematic. Women's rights, violence in history, punishments, all of it. I typed up notes. I rehearsed speeches. I planned a conversation with Amina in my head 100 different ways. I was gonna walk up to her, lay out everything I had learned, and tear her world down with facts and contradictions and gotcha questions. But the day I saw her again, sitting on the same bench under the tree, something unexpected happened. I froze. She looked up, saw me, and smiled, same peaceful smile. "Hi, Tyler." Just that. No bitterness. No awkwardness. Just warmth. And suddenly, everything I had rehearsed sounded stupid. Petty. Well, we talked. Casual stuff. She mentioned she was fasting that day, some voluntary fast, not even Ramadan, and I asked why. Her answer? To remind myself that I'm more than my wants. I didn't know what to say to that. Still, when we did finally run into each other again, outside the library, mid-afternoon sunlight pouring through the trees, I knew I had to speak. She looked surprised, then smiled. "Hey, stranger." I smiled back. "Hey, you look peaceful." "I feel it," I said, and I meant it. There was a pause. Then I said, "I just wanted to thank you." Her eyes softened. "For what?" "For being true to yourself. For not compromising your values. For planting the seed, even if you didn't know it." She didn't say anything for a second. Then she said something that nearly broke me. "Tyler, I prayed for you." My throat tightened. "What?" "I didn't know what you were going through. But I could tell something was shifting. I asked Allah to guide you, not for me, but for you." That was it. That was all she said. And in that moment I knew I didn't love her the way I thought I did. I admired her. I respected her. But what I felt now wasn't about her at all. It was about what she had led me to without ever trying. We didn't date. We didn't become some Hallmark story. She graduated a year later and moved out of state for grad school. We've messaged a few times, eat greetings, the occasional, hope you're doing well. But that's it. And honestly, that's enough. Because I didn't become Muslim for her. I became Muslim in spite of her. Because of her. Through her. All at once. She lit the match. God lit the fire. People still ask me about my story sometimes. Especially other reverts. They want the fairy tale version. The love story. The Hollywood ending. But I always tell them the truth. This was never about revenge. Not really. It was about identity. About ego. About a broken guy who thought he was too smart to believe in anything, trying to prove a woman wrong, and being humbled by the very thing he tried to destroy. And in that humility, I found peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from surrender.
I don't know exactly when the hatred began. Maybe it was the first time she corrected me in a meeting, gently, with that damn soft smile of hers that made everyone nod like she was some corporate saint. Or maybe it was when she got promoted in less than a year, while I'd been busting my ass for 3 and still hadn't made it past content lead. Her name was Layla. She wore a hijab, always coordinated with her outfit, classy as hell. And somehow, she pulled off being quiet and powerful. You know the type. The everyone loves her. The always calm. The impossible to read. And me. I was loud, bold, always pushing ideas, staying late, doing the most. And yet, somehow, she was the one they listened to. First, it was small things. I'd roll my eyes when she talked in meetings. Make jokes about her prayer breaks. Not loud enough for her to hear, but enough for the others to laugh uncomfortably. I was that person. The one who couldn't stand how perfect someone else seemed, especially when that someone didn't even try. I convinced myself she was fake. No one is that poised unless they're hiding something. And that's when the idea started forming. What if she was hiding something? What if I could find it? It wasn't just petty jealousy anymore. It became a mission. I wanted to expose her not just to the team but to the whole damn company. I wanted to make her fall from that little throne she sat on. And the craziest part. Do it. I started reading the Quran. It was a Friday night and I was 4 glasses of wine deep, scrolling through Reddit and Islamic forums like some conspiracy theorist. My tabs were filled with shocking verses in the Quran, what Muslims really believe, and embarrassingly, how to prove Islam is oppressive. I told myself it was research. I even started saving quotes, highlighting things I thought would make her look bad. My plan was to accidentally bring them up in team conversations, or maybe slide them into anonymous complaints. I wanted to find something she couldn't explain, something that would finally crack her image. But the weirdest thing happened. The more I read, the less angry I felt. There was this one verse, I still remember it. And we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to the worlds. 21:107. A mercy. I reread it 3 times. I wasn't expecting mercy. I was expecting control, oppression, harshness, anything that would justify what I was doing. But that verse, it stuck in my brain like a splinter I couldn't pull out. The next Monday I saw her in the break room. She was pouring tea and humming something. I don't know why, but I asked, "What are you singing?" She looked up, surprised I spoke to her. "It's a surah. From the Quran." Course it was. "What's it about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She smiled, that same calm damn smile. "It's a prayer for protection." I didn't say anything else. But that night I looked up the surah. And the English translation was beautiful. It talked about seeking refuge from darkness, from envy, from the whisperings of evil. Felt familiar. I was supposed to be proving her wrong. But I started reading the Quran every night. Not just quotes anymore, whole passages. I read stories of the prophets, verses about patience, justice, self-restraint. Some of it was confusing. Some of it made me angry. But some of it, a lot of it, made me feel. And I hated that. I started dreaming about her. Not in a weird way, just moments, flashes. Her praying alone in the conference room, kneeling on a small mat while the rest of us talked about brand metrics and click-through rates. The quiet focus in her eyes. The stillness. Peace. One morning I got into the office early and found her praying. Froze. She didn't see me at first. Her forehead touched the ground, her lips moving silently. And for the first time I saw her not as some perfect rival, but as someone human. She finished and turned around slowly. I expected her to be annoyed, embarrassed even. But she just said, "Good morning," like nothing had happened. I wanted to say something sarcastic. I wanted to find some flaw. But instead I mumbled, "Morning," and walked out like I was the one who got caught. Things started changing. I stopped gossiping about her. I stopped drinking on weekends. I even caught myself looking for halal recipes online. What the hell was happening to me? Yet, I didn't stop reading. In fact, I started reading more. The breaking point came during a strategy meeting. One of the execs asked for feedback on Layla's campaign, and I had the perfect opportunity to sabotage her. I had emails, notes, little things I'd saved from months ago. But I didn't use them. I looked at her, calm, poised, unaware that I had ever hated her this much, and I realized I couldn't do it. Not because I suddenly loved her, but because I hated what I had become. She looked at me when I spoke, and I nodded in her direction. "Her campaign was brilliant," I said. She smiled. And for the first time it didn't make me sick. It made me feel free. But that night something else happened, something I never expected. I cried on my bedroom floor, whispering a prayer to a God I didn't yet believe in. And I felt something answer me. I didn't cry like that often. But that night, after whispering words I didn't even know I believed, I just fell apart. It wasn't guilt. Not exactly. It was more like this wave of sadness for who I'd become. All those months scheming against someone who had never once raised her voice at me. Someone who smiled even when I was ice cold. I wasn't religious. Never had been. Raised Anglican, sure, but my family treated church like jury duty, something you did twice a year because it was expected. God was never more than a vague concept, a polite footnote in holiday speeches. But now, I was praying. Not to Jesus. Not even to God the way I'd learned. I was praying to the one I kept reading about in the Quran. I didn't tell anyone, of course. I mean, can you imagine? The company gossip mill would combust if they knew I, the edgy British girl who once made burqa jokes, was suddenly defending hijabis and deleting tequila pics from Instagram. Still, it didn't stop me from digging deeper. At first, my searches were still double-edged. I'd type things like contradictions in the Quran or problematic hadith, hoping to find that one thing that would make it all collapse. But it kept backfiring. Every gotcha verse I found had context, like real academic context, that made it make sense. I started reading tafsir. I even watched lectures from Muslim scholars on YouTube. Like actual scholars, not random dudes with TikTok beards yelling into a camera. And with each video, the hate started to die. There was one night I remember vividly. I was watching this clip of a Muslim woman explaining what modesty meant in Islam. Not just the clothes but the behavior. The way you speak. The way you carry yourself. The why behind it all. She said, hijab is not about oppression. It's about liberation from being seen as an object. It's about defining your worth before anyone else can. That shook me. Because for years, I had used my appearance as a weapon. My body, my fashion, my flirtation. All tools in the corporate game. And yet I never once felt powerful. Only exhausted. Always performing. Layla. She never performed. She never had to. At work, she and I still didn't talk much. But something in the air had shifted. One day I held the elevator for her. She smiled and said thank you like she always did. But this time she asked, "Are you okay?" Froze. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to shrug and play it cool. But instead I said, "Honestly, I don't know anymore." And she didn't press. She just nodded gently like she understood. Like maybe she had once felt that same ache. I didn't sleep that night. Instead I reread the story of Joseph, in the Quran. The betrayal by his brothers. The prison. the forgiveness, the dignity, and I thought about my own betrayal, of myself, of what I thought I stood for, of Layla, who had never even known the full extent of my cruelty. Hit me like a freight train. I wasn't trying to expose her. I was trying to bury my own shame. The next day I deleted everything. All the screenshots, all the saved files. The notes I'd kept in a folder titled Layla Weak Points. It made me sick just to look at it. And then I did something terrifying. I sent her a message. Hey, can I talk to you sometime soon? Nothing work-related. Just something I need to say. She replied within minutes. I'm around after lunch. Want to grab coffee? I stared at the screen for 5 full minutes before typing. Thanks. We sat in the small cafe across the street. She ordered mint tea. I stuck with black coffee, my hands shaking around the cup. I owe you an apology, I blurted before she even sat down properly. She blinked. Okay. I haven't been a good colleague. Actually, I've been horrible, jealous, rude, judgmental, and I swallowed hard. I wanted to ruin you. Silence. I expected shock, anger, slap across the table. Instead, she said, I figured. And blinked. You what? I figured something was going on. I didn't know it was that deep, but I could tell you weren't happy. That stung more than anger ever could. I thought you were pretending, I said quietly. That the whole calm, graceful, prayerful thing was just an act. It's not. I know that now. We talked for almost an hour. Not about work. Not even about religion, at least not directly. We talked about values. About loneliness. About how it felt to walk into rooms where people assumed the worst of you. And before we left, I asked her, why didn't you ever call me out? She smiled. Because I knew one day you'd see it for yourself. That night, I knelt beside my bed again. But this time, I didn't just whisper vague apologies to a maybe God. This time I said out loud, if you're there, guide me. Because I can't keep living like this. And as cliché as it sounds, felt something shift, something open, not a flash of light, not a voice in the sky. But then, something happened at work that changed everything. A mistake. Big one. And suddenly, Layla's job was on the line, because of a decision I had made. And I had to choose. Step up and protect her. Or stay silent, and watch the company do the very thing I once planned. They say karma has a way of circling back to you. But I don't think this was karma. This was a test. A week after that conversation with Layla, things were finally starting to feel okay. She didn't hate me. I was reading the Quran every night. I was calmer at work. Even my friends noticed something was different. Are you meditating or something? One of them asked. I laughed and almost told the truth. Almost. Then came the mistake. It was a scheduling error. An algorithm shift that affected one of our major ad clients. We were working on a Ramadan campaign, and someone had pushed the wrong regional targeting. Ads meant for the Middle East went live in Australia. It was a disaster. The client was furious. And guess whose name was attached to the account? Lila's. But the decision to approve the ad push. That was mine. I had signed off late at night without double-checking the geotags. I remembered it clearly. I was tired, annoyed, and too distracted by another video I had queued up about the Prophet's kindness to orphans. I clicked approve and shut my laptop. Now it was all unraveling. Management called an emergency meeting. There was talk of formal warnings. The phrase client retention risk was thrown around like a grenade. And through it all, Layla just sat there. Like always. Except this time I saw the tension in her eyes. She was scared. And I knew why. Because for a hijabi woman in corporate America, one mistake wasn't just a mistake. It was a label. A reason to be excluded, restructured, or quietly let go. And the worst part. She didn't even know I was the one who caused it. After the meeting, I stood outside the office, phone in hand, staring at an email draft. It read, Hi all, I just want to clarify that the final approval on the ad shift was made by me. Layla had flagged the targeting issue earlier, but I failed to follow up. My finger hovered over send, and I froze. Because in that moment, I heard the old me whisper, "This is your out. Or clean. No one knows. Let it go. Let her take the fall." It was everything I had once wanted. But it felt disgusting. I looked up at the sky. Gray, heavy, like it could rain any second, and I said under my breath, "Not this time." Then I hit send. The fallout was fast. I was called into HR. The manager was surprised. Layla had never mentioned my name. She'd taken the heat silently, trying to protect the project. "You're lucky you came forward," the director said. "We value integrity." Integrity. I just discovered I had some. I was given a formal warning, fair, deserved. Layla's record was cleared. She was removed from the blame list. And that should have been the end of it. But instead, something bigger happened. 2 days later she came to my desk. "Want to grab lunch?" she asked. It was a simple sentence. But it felt like a bridge being built between two cliffs that were never meant to meet. We sat on a bench outside, sandwiches in hand. I told her everything, the mistake, the email, even the part about almost letting it go. She listened quietly. Then she said, "You've changed." "I know," I whispered. "And I think I want to keep changing." "Are you thinking about Islam?" I hesitated, not out of shame but out of fear. "Yeah," I said. "But not because of you. Not anymore. It started because I wanted to destroy you. But now it's because I want to save myself." She smiled. Not smug. Not superior. Just kind. "I'll help however I can," she said. Over the next few weeks I kept learning. I started waking up earlier. Stopped drinking entirely. Deleted every post that made me cringe. Started covering my body more. Not because anyone told me to, but because I felt lighter when I did. I began fasting on Mondays and Thursdays. Read Surah Maryam out loud. Moved to tears by the story of Jesus and his mother. I memorized Al-Fatiha. I watched videos on how to pray. I was still me. Still British. Still sarcastic, stubborn, overly caffeinated. But something inside me was shifting. And one night I walked to a local mosque. It wasn't a grand conversion moment. No crowds. No cameras. Just me, a quiet imam, and Layla standing behind me with tears in her eyes. I said the words, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah." I testify that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. That night I didn't cry because I was broken. I cried because I was finally whole. But not everyone was happy. When the company found out I converted, rumors started. And one person in particular, someone I never expected, decided to make me the new target. Because corporate America has never been kind to women who change the rules. Converting didn't make life easier. Just made it clearer. I thought once I said the Shahada, things would get lighter. And in a way they did. My heart felt cleaner, my nights more peaceful, my life more intentional. But the world didn't change just because I did. First, it was little things. People at work stopped inviting me to happy hours. My manager asked, "Are you still going to be as ambitious now that you're spiritual?" I started getting weird comments. "Do you have to pray here? You don't look like a typical Muslim." And my favorite, "You were way more fun before." Layla warned me it might happen. But I guess I didn't realize how lonely it could feel to become something people didn't expect or want me to be. And then came Emily. Emily had always been neutral toward me. Smiley, polite, HR-friendly. But something changed the moment she saw me in my long cardigan and hijab at the office for the first time. "Oh," she said, eyebrows raised. "You're really doing this?" He nodded. "Yeah." She didn't say congratulations. Just walked away with her mouth tight. I should have known that was the beginning. It started with passive-aggressive emails. Then accidental mistakes that were somehow always blamed on me. And finally a formal complaint. "She's being disruptive," Emily had written. She makes other employees uncomfortable with her sudden religious displays. They pulled me into a meeting. I brought Layla with me as a support person. The director looked awkward. We're not here to challenge your personal beliefs. We just want to make sure they're balanced with the company culture. Translation: tone it down. Would you say this to a Christian wearing a cross? Layla asked, calm as ever. Silence. Later that day, Emily cornered me near the elevator. You know, not everyone's convinced this little rebrand of yours is genuine. My jaw clenched. Excuse me. Oh, come on. You hated Layla. We all saw it. Now suddenly you're her twin. People are talking. And that's when I realized. She was me. Told me. Suspicious. Jealous. Desperate for validation. I almost snapped. I almost said something cruel. Something biting and British and unforgivable. But instead I said, you don't have to believe me. She blinked. I didn't do this for you. Or for Layla. Or for anyone. I did it for peace. Something I hope you find too. And I walked away. The complaint didn't go anywhere. Layla defended me. So did two other colleagues. People I never realized had been quietly watching my growth. But the tension remained. So I made a choice. I left the company. Felt scary at first. Like failure. Like giving up. But the truth is, it was the most powerful thing I'd ever done. I moved to a different city. Started freelancing. Volunteered with refugee support groups. Began praying in a real mosque 5 times a day. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing recognition. I was chasing sincerity. One evening, as I walked home from Isha prayer, I saw a group of teenage girls giggling on a bench. One of them wore a hijab, awkwardly like she was still figuring it out. She looked up and smiled at me. And I smiled back. Because I knew what she was trying to become. I had hated someone once for wearing that scarf. Then I tried to tear her down. Then I learned from her. And now, I was her. If you had told me 2 years ago that I'd be a Muslim woman walking home in flats and a flowy abaya, with peace in my heart and Layla on speed dial, I would have laughed in your face. But now I cry in gratitude. Every single night. Revenge was my beginning. But it wasn't my ending. Because sometimes the person you want to destroy the most is the person who ends up saving you. And sometimes the religion you try to disprove becomes the one thing that finally makes you whole. She hated her Muslim coworker and tried to destroy her reputation. But as she dug into Islam to find her flaws, she found her faith instead.
My name's Li Wei. I'm 42, born and bred in Shanghai, and I built a business empire that stretches across 3 continents. But no matter how many zeros are on my bank account, there's one thing I couldn't buy: respect for my neighbor, James. James is the kind of guy who smiles too much and talks about God like he's known him his whole life. The moment he moved into the apartment next to mine in Sydney, I hated him. See, years ago, James's company accidentally undercut one of my biggest contracts, costing me millions. That business deal was supposed to be the final piece to my expansion. But thanks to James and his Australian arrogance, I lost everything overnight. So I told myself I would make him pay. Not physically, but by exposing the hypocrisy I saw in his faith and in his perfect life. I would dig into his beliefs, find the cracks, and bring his whole world crashing down. The day I decided to confront James, I was burning inside. I wanted answers. I wanted him to squirm, to see cracks in that shiny smile of his. I knocked on his door, and he opened it like nothing was wrong, warm, welcoming. "James," I said, "we need to talk." He invited me in without hesitation. His apartment was simple but cozy. Photos of his family, a small cross on the wall, and a well-worn Bible on the coffee table. I started with the obvious. You talk about God like he's perfect. But how can a perfect God allow bad things? Like the way your company ruined my business. James looked at me with calm eyes. "That's a question many have struggled with," he said. "But I believe God's love is bigger than our pain." I scoffed. "Love? Tell that to my lawyers." He didn't get defensive. Instead, he shared a story about forgiveness. how he once lost a business deal, but chose to pray for the other side instead of seeking revenge. His words struck a nerve I didn't know I had. We talked late into the night. He told me about grace, mercy, and peace. I challenged him. He listened. No shouting, no judgment, just patience. But beneath my anger, a tiny seed of doubt began to grow. Could there be something real in what he said? Or was I just losing my edge? Next time, I'll tell you about the moment I realized James's faith was stronger than my rage. The weeks after that night were the hardest. I kept going back and forth between rage and confusion. James had shown me a side of faith I didn't expect, gentle, forgiving, and patient. But my mind was a battlefield. I was consumed by the memories of betrayal, of my empire crumbling and my pride shattering. One evening, I invited James over, not to attack, but because I was desperate to understand. He arrived with a simple gift, a worn copy of the Quran. "You should read this," he said softly, "not to fight, but to see." I laughed, but accepted. For days, I sat alone in my study, turning pages that felt heavy and foreign. I saw verses about mercy, charity, and peace. I saw the story of the Prophet Muhammad, his patience, his struggle, his humanity. One passage stopped me cold. "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." Those words echo my own life's pain, my own shattered hopes. But understanding was just the beginning. My old instincts told me to reject it, to prove it wrong, to cling to my anger. But James didn't push. He waited. One night, after a long conversation, I broke down. I told him about my mother's death, my loneliness, the emptiness behind my wealth. He listened without interruption. Then he said, "Faith isn't about perfection, Li Wei. It's about surrender, about healing." That night, I prayed for the first time in years. Not out loud, but in silence. My journey wasn't smooth. There were days I wanted to quit, to return to my bitterness. But with each passing day, I felt a light growing inside me. James and I started spending more time together, sharing meals and stories. He introduced me to the mosque nearby, where I met people from all walks of life, people who had found peace despite their struggles. Slowly, I felt walls I didn't know I built begin to crumble. One afternoon, I asked James, "Why didn't you hate me back after what happened in my business?" He smiled gently, because hate only destroys the hater. The day I took my Shahida, the declaration of faith, felt like coming home. Standing there beside James in the mosque, I repeated the words, "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger." My voice trembled, but my heart was steady. It was the end of my grudge, the beginning of my new life. I won't lie, my path wasn't easy. Some old friends turned away. Family questioned my choices. But for the first time, I was at peace. James and I became more than neighbors. We became brothers. We worked together on community projects, helping refugees and those in need. My business shifted focus too. I started investing in ethical projects, ones that gave back. One night, sitting on James's porch, I looked at him and said, "You saved me. I thought I was coming for revenge, but you showed me mercy instead." He laughed. "Sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who fight the hardest, but the ones who forgive. If you're holding a grudge, if you're burning with anger, remember this story. Sometimes the path to healing isn't through victory over others, but through victory over yourself."